welcome back, of course. Just audio over the last 24 hours. We featured a lot of audio, of course, from the State of the Union address last night. If you didn't get a chance to watch it, we did post up a link over at our social media, both at X and also our Facebook page. I highly encourage you to listen to it. And we're sitting here talking about it. It is an important policy. I will tell you, as I've said, I usually kind of dread getting ready to watch these State of the Union addresses simply because the theater sometimes overwhelms the message, but I wouldn't say that that's what I got last night. And someone who's going to help us understand this a little bit more, of course, President over at AAF, of course, Advancing American Freedom, Tim Chapman joins us. Tim, how are you this morning?
Hey, Jeff, I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
Always a pleasure. Did you get it? How close were you to the State of the Union address? Were you in the area? Did you watch it from home? Where'd you watch it?
Yeah, we're in Washington, so I was probably 7 blocks, and it was. You're right to point out the theater. I do think that a lot of these State of the Union addresses are theater. I have to confess before I talk about the way I thought about it last night. I myself have also grown weary of these State of the Unions. I think I think that the model itself is starting to strain a little bit, and I really didn't like it under the Biden administration, and even under the Trump administration. I think it's a hard place to have a real, honest policy conversation. That said, I think the president acquitted himself fairly well last night. He did what he needed to do. He certainly scored some political points. On the policy, I think it's less so. I think it's more of a jump ball on the policy as to whether what he was arguing for is really connecting with the American people. You see a lot of disparity between what the president promoted last night in terms of the economic situation and the way people feel about it. I think that's worth drilling down on. But overall, I give the president good marks for accomplishing what he needed to do. Give him a B+, maybe A-, something around there.
Yeah, I gave him a B+. I gave him a regular B, actually, so you graded a little bit better than I did. When we look at that, I want you to kind of drill down a little bit in that, those moments of opportunity that, you and I both know that, with a lot of these shiny objects that are going on right now in our country, this is New Hampshire, first in the nation primary state. You know this state well. We don't go into the shiny objects. Affordability is going to be on the midterms. Absolutely. Where did he miss his opportunities to really connect what he was saying to the kitchen table? Forget all the plethora of stuff, right to the kitchen table.
First, I think it's important to notice that on the affordability issue, even when he says the word, it bothers him. And I don't think that does the president a service. I think, he talks about the word being a scam. I think you almost feel how annoyed he is that he has to address this issue in the speech, although his advisors clearly know that this is an issue that people care about. And you could tell that he didn't really want to address it. Look, there are a couple areas where I think there's a real disconnect. One, on the tariffs. I thought it was a very small part of the, more than 90-plus minute speech. But on the tariffs, I've been watching Congress forever. That was the one moment where you could hear a pin drop when he was talking in the room. And I could, there's a lot of rah-rah on the right side of the aisle for so many things. But on that, I think you could feel the room saying, you know what, this is his baby. This is his issue. He wants to talk about it. It's uncomfortable for all of us. And you see it in the polls already that the tariff program is 30-plus points underwater nationally and even worse in some major swing states. And I thought it was very telling that the president, to elicit the applause line on the tariff issue, had to actually tie the tariff issue to potentially what he said could be coming, which is the elimination of the income tax, which I think is not fair for him to do. It is not possible. I'd love to eliminate the income tax, but if you want tariffs to replace the income tax, you have to take today's current tariff rates, which are already too high and causing massive affordability issues, and raise them on all nations across the world by 77%. And as you know, and I think as many of your listeners know, that is not 77% rate, that's applied to foreign nations. That's applied to the importers who bring goods into this nation, i.e. the American people. So sometimes businesses, and sometimes it gets passed on from businesses to people who purchase the goods. So I think there's a real disconnect there. I think he went further on the affordability issue, and his implication on housing was that the way that they were going to fix the housing issue was lower interest rates. Again, I like the idea of lower interest rates. Great, okay? But that's not fixing the housing issue and the affordability issue when it comes to cost of living there is mostly a supply and demand issue, okay? And he has to figure out the supply side of this issue. Lowering interest rates figures out the demand side of this issue, and in many ways could contribute to higher housing prices.
Correct.
If you lower the interest rates. It makes it easier to get credit, and housing prices will continue to climb. So if he really wants to get to the supply side of the issue, he needs to be talking about free market solutions like deregulation, new zoning, new permitting rules, all of these kinds of things that can contribute to a greater housing supply, so that entry-level housing is a much more accessible goal, and the American people can achieve that.
Once again, we're talking to Tim Chapman, of course, president over at AAF, of course, Advancing American Freedom. Post that information up online. You know, Tim, I'm with you. When I wasn't sure how he was going to handle the tariff conversation, my first instinct and my gut was telling me he would come out too strong and too, I want to use the word critical, but too kind of vicious on the Supreme Court justices that were there. I was surprised by the tempered approach as well. But, you know, that falling flat, it wasn't just in that chamber. That falling flat is across the country on tariffs. And, you know, it'll be a hard sell for him. Were there any things that, you know, certainly looking at that bridge, were there any things that you did hear that might be something that not only could he get Republicans behind, but maybe even a few Democrats moving forward?
Well, look, I think the thing that was his strongest was when he was talking about the importance of fixing the illegal immigration issue in this country. And I do think there are Democrats, whether it's like Senator Fetterman from Pennsylvania or others, who are willing to give this administration a chance when it comes to ensuring that we enforce our borders and ensuring that we clean up our streets when it comes to illegals who are in the country. So I think that was good. I think you could even potentially get some Democrats to come across the aisle on something that polls like 80%, like something like the SAVE Act. It should be a no-brainer. Mm-hmm. It should be a no-brainer that people, when they go to vote in this nation, that we somehow verify that they're United States citizens. So I think he has some opportunities there. The problem is stylistically, he's not interested in bringing Democrats across the aisle on that issue. And you saw that very plainly last night. It was smart of him politically to put the Democrats in the box that he did during the middle section of that speech when it came to law and order enforcement on illegal immigration. But it's not that kind of style is not the kind of style that's going to make a John Fetterman try to lead a coalition to come across the aisle and help him pass something like the SAVE Act.
No, they have short memories in Washington, D.C. on things like that as well. Once again, we're talking to Tim Chapman. I do want to ask you about one policy that I found interesting. I know you guys have written on this already, and some of your experts have been on our show talking about, you know, where are we going with AI, these data centers that are going to be out there. And when we look at the kitchen table issue, number 3 on that kitchen table issue here in New Hampshire is energy. He proposed this opportunity that should data centers be coming into communities, that he is going to tie those people who are going to be presenting those data centers to provide their energy source. Now, I'm not opposed to the conversation in a larger sense, and I can see where some communities are quite concerned about that. But when you look at that kind of certainly a policy point that he brought forward, your thoughts on that, and is there something missing in that conversation?
Yeah, I think he's right to be thinking about it. I mean, it's very clear that we talked about supply and demand earlier. If data centers are coming into communities, they're sucking up massive amounts of energy, and that impacts the supply-demand equation, which will also raise energy prices for people around them if there's no sort of outlet to it. So I think he's right to do that. What I'm curious about, I think there's a real tension at the heart of the president's coalition on AI. Okay. I think on one side, he has a more populist nationalist base who is extremely skeptical of the promise of AI, very, very skeptical of the companies themselves who are investing massive amounts of the AI, and wary that AI could be the kind of innovation that really damages the job markets in the short term. So I think he's right to focus on that. And then on the other side of his coalition, you have a lot of the tech people who have been major investors in some of the president's initiatives, and who have gone way out of their way to ingratiate themselves with the president and his family. And on that side of the issue, he's looking at dump trucks full of campaign cash that could be accessible to him. And so I think it's a tough issue for him to thread the needle on. I don't think he himself knows exactly where they want to land on this. So I think that's just going to be a challenge for the administration going forward politically.
Yeah, I think so as well. Once again, Tim Chapman, of course, president from AAF, of course, Advancing American Freedom. Yeah, I do want to, I'll give you a final thought on what you see from the State of the Union, where we go from next from this. I do want to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about the organization. We have had some of your experts come and visit us. To many people, you're a relatively new organization. I know you've been out there for a while. Our friend, Vice President Mike Pence, started the organization. How's it been going, and some of the key focuses that you're looking at for 2026 for Advancing American Freedom?
Sure. Thanks for giving me that opportunity. AAF is going well. We've more than doubled in size over the last month and a half. We've been very fortunate to be able to bring on some very top talent scholars here in our headquarters in Washington, D.C. Fundraising is going well as well. Look, here's the reason things are going well. I think that the conservative movement is starting to see a sunsetting time frame on the Trump era.
Okay.
And it is very natural. The president is in his second term. He cannot run again. And so there's a looming question over the Republican Party and the conservative movement as to what this movement stands for after the Trump era. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of people who are concerned that some elements of the Trump coalition that we referred to earlier, specifically sort of the nationalist, conservative, populist element, are moving more towards a government-centric approach to problems. And what people are, I think, different factions are growing, and the kind of Reaganite, traditional conservative, limited government, free market faction is looking to organize itself. This institution that we are building here stands for all of those principles. And that doesn't mean that we stand for or against President Trump. It means that we're standing outside of the political fray and trying to point towards principles that we think have been time-tested and work. So things are going well at AAF because I think there's a real market for a return to a more limited government, free market perspective. And especially as you look at, we've had this, we're like I said, we're coming down on the end of the second Trump term. One thing that is not going well is the size and scope of the federal government and our federal deficit. And that is a huge, massive problem. It's a generational problem. It's perhaps the most immoral thing we could do to next generations to saddle them with the kinds of debt. By the way, it contributes to affordability. It contributes to interest rates. And so I think things are going well because people are looking at ways that we can address that. When we get to 2028, we really need to be thinking about not necessarily as much who we are for, not the personality we're for, but what we're for. And that's what we're trying to build here at AAF.
And once again, Tim Chapman, president at AAF, Advancing American Freedom. You hear the scholars on this show. You've heard them from quite some time. They join us every Wednesday at 9 o'clock. And so Tim took that slot, so it's fantastic. I think you're right. I think one of the things, you actually, can I hold you over to the next segment? I do want to get a good touch of you. Oh,
yeah,
perfect. I'm glad of that. You grab an extra cup of coffee. What we'll do is we'll take our break and we'll come back and continue our conversation with Tim Chapman. Reminding you, we did post this information up online. Take a break, right back on the Morning Update. Welcome back. Of course, Tim Chapman, our guest, decided to hang over for another segment, and particularly when we look at Advancing American Freedom, as you guys get used to many of these organizations. Tim, one thing that, many of the people that are part of your team, and the thing I enjoy about your organization is that when we look at the ability to have a stimulating, robust conversation that doesn't devolve into just name-calling or anything like that. Certainly your organization has peers. There's some organizations on the left that still have that sincerity onto themselves as well. When you look at moving the conservative movement in a direction that re-engages those conversations, I think Charlie Kirk, in a lot of ways, helped stimulate that type of conversation. Of course, Vice President Pence, who we've had on the show in the past, on my old show, he's always had that kind of ability to bring it in. What landmines do you see out there to having a robust conversation, whether from the conservative or progressive end, that actually gets away from the name-calling and the tribalism?
Thanks for saying that. Look, it's such a problem. I think tribal politics in our two-party system right now is probably one of the biggest threats to the republic we face. Because what it does is it eliminates everybody's ability to kind of sift through the clutter and see what's real and what's not. The biggest problem we have on the right these days is the influencer set on X. And it's, yes, many institutions have drifted towards worshiping specific political characters, but that's driven in no small part by the algorithm on X and by what X rewards for political actors right now. And so you see lots of personalities. Charlie, you're right to point out that Charlie was one of the people who was trying to have real conversations, but people who have sprung out of his organization are doing the opposite. You look at somebody like Candace Owens and just like how absolutely vitriolic she is online right now, what she's doing to Charlie's own widow, what she's doing to that organization, what she's doing to the conservative movement. You have people like Tucker Carlson who are just as bad, probably worse. And so I feel like until we figure out our influencer problem on the right, until members of Congress stop trying to act for clicks on X and start trying to act for the better of the nation, I think we're going to be in a tough spot. But that's why it's important for people to engage. That's why we're trying to build this organization at AAF. Like I said earlier, the idea here is not to attach ourselves to political personalities, but to attach ourselves to principles. Principles can stand the test of time. These personalities come and go. And I think that's the main challenge for Republicans. And if we get out of the woods faster than Democrats do on that, the country will be far better off.
Well, and once again, we're talking to Tim Chapman. We put the information up online if you want to find out more. And that's, when you think about it, I know New Hampshire, coming to New Hampshire, it doesn't matter what your political ideology is. We like robust, fair conversation. We actually like the counterpoint an awful lot in the state, and I hope we get more of that. Any final thoughts before we let you go, whether it's on SCOTUS or any other things that you guys are thinking about before we break?
Well, I'll go back to that one vignette that we talked about earlier on, the tariff one.
Yeah.
It was so striking to me. Most of the network feeds had a side-by-side of the president while he was talking about the tariff issue and of Amy Coney Barrett while he was talking about the tariff issue. I think you could read so much just into the body language during that. When they showed the side-by-side, the president was insisting in front of the Congress a couple things. One, he was insisting that the newfound tariff authority that he's using under something called Section 122 had been, according to the president, fully vetted legally and approved. You could read on Justice Barrett's face some disagreement with that notion. And I think what you're setting up is the president's making a mistake here in setting up the tariffs as being the centerpiece of what he fights about within his own party and with the other party for the next 3 years. I think it's his weakest ground by far. I think he's going to lose more in the courts. I think he's creating more uncertainty for the economy because all of these newfound authorities that he's going to try to apply are dubious at best. And so nobody will adjust and make long-term, no businesses that understand the business world will make long-term business decisions because all of it is so tenuous. And I think it's going to be tenuous politically. It's going to be tenuous policy-wise. It's going to be tenuous in the courts. And you could tell from that speech last night, Congress doesn't want to touch this stuff with a 10-foot pole.
No, I think it's just, once again, I know he's going to probably push it. It depends on how tenacious he is. Sometimes he has that terrier attitude in him, and I think that, once again, there are some things that they really do want to work on. The SAVE Act is, of course, the most important one right now. Tim, thanks for joining us this morning. Also, thank you for your team coming on here on our Wednesday segments as well. We wish you the best of luck, and the rest of the day, I know we'll be talking to you again. Look forward to seeing you guys all come to New Hampshire as we start kicking off this campaign more.
Absolutely. We'll do it. Thanks for having me, Jeff.
Outstanding. Once again, Tim Chapman put that information up online.